And we are live here on Plus One EXP's Roll for Content channel. My name is Tony Vicenda. I am Chief Alchemist here at Plus One EXP, which is a weird little brand that multi-classes in tabletop game design, beard and skincare alchemy in the Bardic College of Content Creation. Our hope here at Plus One EXP is to help amazing designers find great players who love their games and amazing players find great designers whose games they can love. We do that in a lot of different ways, but once a month, I sit down with a designer whose system I've been looking at, and I talk to them about that system and the stories it's designed to tell. That's exactly what we're doing tonight with Wythe Marschall from over at Stillfleet Studios. Wythe, super excited to have you on here. Super excited that we're actually getting to do something together on stream, because we've been on stream together briefly. Well, for a long period of time, while I just sat quietly in the background and we played your amazing game Picaro that we got to release. And you do a lot of streaming and other things too, but we've just never had the chance to sit down together. I'm also super excited. You live in Philadelphia now. That's great.
Yeah.
And we're excited. So now that I've doxed you publicly, why don't you tell people who you are, what you do, and if you want to be found online instead of just in the mean streets, tell them where they
Yeah.
can find you.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, to address the doxing that just happened, if you find us in South Philly, then come out, play some games.
You're giving him a
But
neighborhood?
I mean, it's big enough. If you wander around, you might end up spending money here, some supporting other local businesses. But yeah, no, we're very happy to be here. Super happy to be on stream talking about games. And yeah, excited to talk about, among other things, Picaro, which was fun. It's the first game where, I wrote something and I was not the publisher. So it was great to sort of see how, as someone who's really got a well-oiled machine, nod to both games and beard care oil, does their thing. But yeah, who am I? I'm a writer and I design games. And by day, I also do a lot of science communication. So I write about food and medicine. And I love games. I love specifically story-based tabletop games. So when I realized pretty belatedly that I was writing a lot of fun things for my friends, but that could even be a job beyond just my friends. I started pursuing that. So in the last couple of years, yeah, I founded a company with my wife and a couple of friends called Stillfleet Studio to publish Stillfleet, our first game with the system. And since then, myself and some of my friends have authored a small, but growing library of games with the same system, but kind of evolving it. So we really like adventure games. We're also all leftists, so we like to say, the point of it is to make games that are not really educational per se, but just compatible with kind of a leftist identity. They have some sort of thought there beyond slay monsters because monsters evil.
Yeah.
But they're not story games, which is something you and I have talked about before, of learning that as well. As much as I do love telling stories and hacking rules, there is a whole world out there of kind of games that are made for different kinds of experiences. And I do tend to like the adventure of, the clickety clacks and big moments, rolling high on a die and then saying, we slayed Cthulhu in some way, right? So I love space and sci-fi themes. I love espionage, and I'm a leftist, so that was, Stillfleet was really a product of that, and the whole adventure of what it could be to design other games has come out of really designing one game for my friends. So
Love it.
I'm sure we'll talk about that more,
Yeah.
but that's the long and short.
I love it. I'm super excited to dive in. I love the way you like just in our like we've had long conversations about business, our brief interactions around like design and other things. I'm always like super excited by things you pick up on in games that you see, things you'll just like drop about the games you're making. I'm really kind of excited to dive in to like what makes Grit special. I think to start with that though, like I want to talk about, it would have been easy, I think, as y'all were looking at Stillfleet or some of your other games to just be like, oh, like, PBTA exists, or like, if it's in the OSR and SR space, like Troika exists. Like there's all these other games you could have just picked up and used. And not to put anything on those two games specifically, what were the types of stories, like you mentioned the leftist influence, but like what were the types of stories that you were sitting down and saying like, okay, here is the thing that I want to tell, as you were looking at some other systems maybe, or evaluating whether they would be a good fit, or just picking them up for ideas? Like what were you looking at and what were you hoping that they would do?
Yeah, I mean, I can get really specific here, so cut me off if you need to. But I grew up playing second edition, third edition, and then we briefly got into Numenera. I really got into PBTA, but my friends and I weren't playing it. It was more I was reading Apocalypse World and then Tremulous and some other games. Eventually, Cartel I think is really cool. I still have yet to actually play it, but I played Apocalypse World, and that really was a eye-opening moment. So I would say that one. Numenera came out when I'd already developed a lot of the ideas around Stillfleet, but it felt similar. So we actually did try to switch, and I thought, oh, I'll just use, Monty Cook's pretty smart. I'll use what he did. But long and short to answer your question is most D20 games to me, so this includes the Borgs, whatever, and certainly D100 games, they have really wide ranges that take away from epic moments at the table. And PBTA and Forged in the Dark games have very small constricted ranges that similarly don't feel like a lot. The +1, +2, +3, you got a mixed success. It's kind of unclear. It's not as fun to GM, having done both, as binary systems and binary systems with big ranges. You get sort of just a lot of 11s and 13s and results that are just like, yeah, whatever.
You
So
did
I like,
fine.
yeah, you did great. You kind of kicked the door down, whatever. It's like both those systems to me, both those groups of many, many popular systems, which are great games and not at all knocking amazing designers, John Harper, D. Vincent Baker, and all these people. And you can do great things with them. I mean, like Emmy Allen will put out a PBTA game, and I love it. And it's not again something I'm playing as much with my friends, but it's a huge influence on how I'm thinking about, or her D20 games, right? How you write good rules and make fun worlds come to life, and not spend 400 pages on it. But what I ended up doing was coming up with a system that, to me, had the dice rangers I wanted. So from roughly 1 to 4 to roughly 1 to 12. There's very little math. Really for speed, even if you like math, you can always add crunchy epicycles, and we kind of do. So in Stillfleet, you have the hell signs, right? Psionics, which some of those powers are written in real weird loopy ways because they're meant to make you, the player, slow down and feel diegetically like I am essentially a space witch. My mind has been tortured open. I can do the Beyond the Black Pyramid, Stranger Things, quantum movements with my mind, and so I'm rolling 3 dice or something. But for most powers, you're rolling 1 die at a time, and it's a range between 1 to 4 and 1 to 12. There is a pass fail. You know what the number is. And with grit, when we added this other, originally I called it Numa, but I just wanted something that wasn't health, but was a thing you could spend. And then also I have classes in powers where you do spend health. So I had sort of traditional, health goes up and down, HP style pool. And then I also had grit, and adding that as just a generic representation of how hard do you really want this to work. So if you burn it on a roll, it'll probably succeed, but you could fail if you roll a 1. And hey, when you're out, you're tired, you can't keep doing that. You can't use your cool powers. That sort of clicked into place really rapidly for me. So as a GM, it was like a training wheels moment of like, I'd been using, D20 and PBTA and then just didn't need it. Like as soon as I
Yeah.
sort of switched over, everything else I did was in the system that it made sense to me. And more importantly, I would say it made sense to my friends, many of whom had also GM'd a lot. They all played a lot. No one really complained. They all were like, oh, okay, I get it, and just moved on. And so that was the moment when I thought, this is something that should be sort of codified in some way. I didn't even think about publishing a book at that point. It was a couple years later, but definitely it came out of thinking about just some of those systems you mentioned, and just saying what are the ranges that I find pleasurable as a trained screenwriting, and I wanted those moments of like you definitely did or didn't do the big thing, and your
Yeah.
character has to respond to it. And I love noir Coen brothers, so it doesn't all have to be epic. I killed the Goblin Boss King. It's more, I tried, I slipped. I'm now in a pile of shit, below the throne of the Goblin Boss King, and I have to hide and I have to crawl away, and that's fine. But you know that a thing happened or didn't. You know as a player how to respond. I know as a GM how to respond. So it was. I've been talking a lot about this with Vex, who I think is in the chat, but handshakes, right? When do you and the player and the GM both know what's kind of going to happen, and then you let physics decide, does it go left or right?
Love it. Yeah. So, I mean, I do love, because like, even at the end of the day, like that, 1 to 4, the 1 to 12, like you're kind of living in the numeric range without the same kind of bell curve as PBTA, while still
Yeah.
being like, hey, like we're rolling a die and seeing what comes up on it. And then also just having the powers where you're doing a little bit of resource management. Like this is what like we can do. You talk about on the SRD page, it's like intuitive rolling, unforgettable powers, right? So you're also building in this ability to say like there are things you can do, and you will know that you can do at the very beginning. It's one of the things when we were developing Down We Go, like people were like, "What's it like? Am I just a little bit better at things than your average person?" And also, I can do a couple cool things maybe before I die. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's it. Like, like you've got some abilities, you've got a dice roll, like, you've got a little bit of a benefit, but yeah, you're just a little guy. Like, and it exists in kind of the like a lot of people will use different terms like OSR or like NSR, which is the one that you oftentimes use when you're describing the grit system. Or like we love old school Baroque.
Yeah, I do like that.
So like there's all these different little weird ways we're all like talking about it. But I think one of the things that caught me up, there's different times where you will talk about the grit system as either being rules dark in some places and rules bright in other places. Like you'll use kind of different ways to flex out how you're doing it. I want to kind of dig in on those terms a little bit. Like when you like one, like if people, for people who may not be familiar, why don't you tell us a little bit about like what you perceive the NSR as being, because we don't need to
Yeah.
we don't need to work on anybody's definition of yours for this but yours for this stream, and then kind of like how you see the grit system kind of connecting in with that, maybe kind of touching on like what does rules dark or rules bright mean a little bit as you're looking at that.
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. And again, I know you probably have many thoughts from a different perspective. You've produced so many games and been involved with so many, and I've been really focused on building out this system and trying to bring it to life because it's worked for me with the kinds of cinematic, player empowering stories, but still very much in that adventure tradition that I like. Which is not to say I don't like other games. It's just that's what I've been focused on.
Yeah.
So I have a very narrow perspective. I should also say mechanical design, while fun, to me, it's a small part of overall game design, and I'm sure we'll touch on some of these
Yeah.
other topics around theming. So I will say, as much as I like the system we have, the dice rolling itself doesn't inherently really say anything about, say, politics, right? That's coming from the framing of who are the players, what are the players doing. So I do think the dice rolling is important to the experience, as a longtime GM of do people understand what's happening? Are there stakes? But it's not the only thing. To answer your question, I think, I heard rules light early on, and I don't know when in the OSR NSR, old school Baroque timeline this is, but that term gets thrown around. And I thought, well, that's cool. I don't like how much D20 systems, and I grew up playing Traveler, and Mothership maybe had come out at that point, and I don't like the crunch, but I also, having played PBTA, thought it was too light. So I thought I wanted something in the medium, and I don't know when I started saying this, but I thought the idea of like I think initially I wanted to call it Void Dark, but like, making the space game where the rules would be sort of simple enough, but I wasn't trying to go ultra simple. I was trying to simulate the kinds of checks that players seem to enjoy rolling in dark sci-fi settings. And then later now, of course, he brought it to other genres. And it's changed a little along the way. And Das Macabre is a good example of that. Lower power, there's fewer attributes, right? There's only 4 attributes instead of 5 scores. And there's fewer checks generally to call. It's medieval times, it's realistic medieval times. And you don't have great scores. So you are more like a normal dude in a zombie apocalypse, which is right. It's the fun of the zombie narrative.
Yeah.
You're not a superhero. Whereas in Stillfleet, you're a space marine who's quietly quitting. You are kind of a super, right? You're a super anti-hero.
Yeah.
You have at least 4 powers that are badass. Your stats are buffed. But of course, there's dangerous aliens and other void miners, other people like you who you might fight. So it's somewhat that balance question. But all to say, to get back to your answer, or to answer your question, I don't know. I think I've used this before, but Rules Bright also just sounds good. There's a guy named Fari RPG you might
Yeah.
know, who published a great whole, I think, SRD and stuff about this. So I sort of said, I just want to shout out Fari RPG because I think that's, to me, the more public face of Rules Bright. But I really liked that definition that they use, and I think it's very applicable to the grid system. I think it's what we're trying to achieve in terms of, hey, it is pretty light, but the goal is not lightness for lightness sake. I think it's meant to create simulation spaces that could go on and on and on for campaigns. They're also fun and easy, and I often run 2-hour games at cons, and people sit down with no, we just played Picaro last weekend at Geneseo at a running gag, and people played it a bunch and had fun, and no one seemed confused. So I think that's the range as like an experience, as a GM that I want to be able to have is sit down, learn it, play it, all the way to like my friends and I play for 2 or more years in a campaign setting. And they also don't get bored of it. They feel like it's extensible. We can make up something together when they get 8th level, 12th level, right? So I think, again, it's that question of what are you trying to design for? And I know many people are looking now at sort of shorter arc experiences, just play it one time for 3 hours, that's it. I think my friends and I like the idea that we'll probably try to make games that are campaignable because we're so excited and we have all these ideas. At the same time, obviously, now I know, especially in the business, you have to have this 2 hour, like, yeah, just sit down and try it, experience this. So that's a really great way to test also how really light are your rules. Can
Well,
you explain them in 5 minutes, you know?
and it's one of those things where like we constantly will hear people talk about like, oh, it's like it's from outside especially, but I think also people who have only ever played one game, um, that it's hard to get people to sit down and play a role playing game. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I think you may be playing the wrong games. Like board game people learn new games all the time and will spend 4 or 5 hours learning and playing the game. RPGs should not, for the most part, can be a very similar experience. And actually, some of them can play faster. Like there are a lot of games out there, like things that are made in the grit system, but are other ones where it's like, yeah, not only can you have a 2 hour taste, you can have a satisfying 2 hour taste, including like getting onboarded. Most Lumen games, right? You can play
Yeah.
Lumen games
Yep.
in 60 to 90 minutes because people also understand the mental handholds and conventions of, oh, it's kind of a looter shooter. Like I know what I'm doing once I know the themes and abilities. I think it's so great to see more and more games where we're getting kind of like not only like the rules being light, but the onboarding experience and the intuitive quality of play getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And it was great to see that like when we did the AP, like it was really great to see it in action of like the players coming in. They all had clear ideas about what they wanted to do. They all had little weirdsies that they wanted to pull off, but they also all knew how to hit the beats, like using the different abilities that were on the character sheet in order to help kind of make that happen and drive that forward with the roles pushing it, one way or the other as you went. Like I've loved being able to see it in play, but I also do think it's a huge kind of thing that more people need to think about and talk about. Vex in the chat also said, and we were talking about the types of characters this create, that it makes them think about the character from the Matrix, who is basically the idea of a handshake protocol, but they don't remember what the name of that character was. Like spot on. Like I do think that's a very good, like if there is ever a Matrix inspired grit game, which somebody should go make. Like that is like I think a kind of perfect understanding of what types of characters you might be trying to embody, like as you're playing. So that's huge. I want to just kind of touch back on it. Like we mentioned it a little bit, like the rules lightness of it and all those different terms. But like, tell me a little bit about like what are the things about like NSR play that you love and that you kind of also see in the grit system?
Yeah, great. Oh, sorry, great question. And you did ask, it was sort of a NSR and then also rules light, and I went
Yeah,
off
yeah.
on the rules light. But to go back to the NSR, and for me again, and I think some of this comes down to literally, did you grow up with OD&D second edition or later? And so, like what era millennial or Gen X or younger person are you? So I'm an like old millennial, like who grew up without computers, then got a computer, right? And that was the shift. But I grew up with second edition and seamlessly to me it didn't really matter. We just started playing 3.5, and that's mostly what we played along with White Wolf games, Traveler. So a lot of and Trinity, which was the White Wolf like sci-fi game. And then I went to college and stopped playing for not even that long, but enough where it felt like this interregnum, right? So for me, it had nothing to do with the eras of D&D or any of that. But I definitely noticed the OSR because blogs, by 2011, right, Twitter's out and blogs are a thing, and people were publishing their own stuff online, and I would read people's work, and it wasn't that I was so into like D&D. It was just like, it was eye-opening, the mechanical design, let's say, of Powered by the Apocalypse. Going back to some of my old books I hadn't looked at since college. It'd been a while I was working, and going back to some of that stuff, it was like old school, literally for me, just nostalgically, but then also online, you had people who had grown up with OD&D and D and were kind of reinventing it on the blogosphere and just sort of swapping cool random tables and character classes. And so that idea of hacking things, I think, is something that many people took away from the OSR in a positive sense. I didn't really care much about the term. I didn't, again, think too much about publishing until much later. And for me, not at least until, I don't know, probably 2015, and I was really thinking at all about writing things down more and publishing them more. And I already had a lot of in my mind about what Stillfleet could be, but um, it wasn't until years later that it even became, a product. So another 5 years, right? So again, this was sort of someone doing a real job and other things, and then later saying, "Oh man, but I really like writing this stuff. I seem pretty good at it. What happens if?" But so to answer your question, I mean, by that time, the OSR, it's not that And again, I'm not saying anything is dead or alive or good or bad, but
When
it,
Google
it def
Plus and the OSR was over. Like, I
yeah,
mean, like we all
yeah,
know it.
yeah,
Beyond that, it's
it's
just a
COVID,
marketing
right?
term, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's COVID and it's like the wide adoption, Stranger Things, right? And there was a turning point when it went from this really weird niche that I talked about with a couple friends to like everyone kind of knew what I was talking about. And 5e, just the AP world, that all sort of happens around the same time. And to me, that was just a shift in culture around games. And as a designer, I had moved so far away at that point from D20 games, from the things of my childhood, that it just felt like I was doing something new. So when I first saw that term NSR, I thought, oh yeah, I mean, it is new school. I want to do something new. I don't want to be in any specific tradition, even though, sure, of course, I grew up playing D&D and I was influenced by Apocalypse World, and I feel like I've been fairly clear about that. But I like the idea of a kind of break. I do also like what you've said about the Baroque as, being able to reflect upon and play with the themes of, the classical, but take it into these other weird spaces. But yeah, I just like the idea of this kind of symmetry of like you have the OSR, that moment is tied to certain people who are really into D&D, basically, and then the NSR is kind of what happens as a lot of those learnings are metabolized with people who aren't as into D20 games. So, to me, Merc Borg still feels very OSR, and there's plenty of people doing interesting stuff with it. But it feels tied to those ranges, those kinds of roles, fighting goblins. NSR games to me queue up, yeah, Spencer's work, right? Lumen, games like that, where you're not necessarily doing the same things, you're not rolling the same dice. And I think more innovation comes out of our little world. And I think there's people even popping in and out or who can cross both spaces,
Yeah.
but in terms of like this stuff that gets me excited and this stuff I actually play, it's more that NSR tradition, if that makes sense.
No,
New.
I love that.
Yeah.
And characters can die.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Which I think, like you do a really great job of like I do think there's a reality in which death is very much a part of your games, right? Like I throw that out kind of glibly, like people can die, but that is a conceit. Like even in Stillfleet, where the character's the most powerful in Stillfleet. Is that the one where they kind of you
Probably,
think
yeah,
yeah,
of our
like
games,
they're
yeah.
the top of the kind of grit scale. Like I love that it is just like you're Marines who are quiet quitting, like but also like they are badasses, right? Like in some ways they are. Oh man, they're like if uh what's the character on Lethal Weapon who's just their last day, right? Like they're like
Oh, yeah.
they're just one day away from
Yeah, yeah.
retirement. But they've been badasses for a long time, or at least they wish they were. And then you've got other ways you've flexed the game out in tremendously different ways. Critters is probably the one where it feels like death isn't the least on the table, but it's the least you're the least concerned with am I gonna die out of all of them. But it's still I think at Murtaugh, thank you. Signal Station always doing the Lord's work of letting us know names in the chat. The But yeah, it is such an interesting thing to kind of see how you've just said, and you talked earlier about kind of like leftist principles, not as a hey we're trying to educate you on leftist principles, but like we want to be able to craft narratives using the grit system that really kind of drives that forward. And that is not mechanical design, right? No, you never roll a dice and it tells you to care for your
Right.
neighbor. Like
Right.
like that's never a mechanical choice, right? That I mean that's never a dice mechanics or resolution mechanics choice, right? That lives in the space of narrative, in the space of like information design, in the space of the types of stories you are actively trying to tell when you sit down to play a grit system. I love grit as an articulation of like I do think traditional like leftist values also too of like this takes work, this takes effort, this takes energy. That is a resource. Like we have a certain amount of it and we need to push forward with it. Like I think there are a lot of like subtle and direct ways that works into how you've designed the system. But talk a little bit about like was there a point at which you became aware when you were designing the grit system that was important to you? Was that something that preceded that where it was like a table culture thing that you were codifying, or was there a certain point at which you were like, hey, when we're designing these games, the ethos we want to design them in is X,
Yeah, I mean that for me is the aha moment where I thought this could be, again, not just codified for my friends for ease of reference at the table, but like a separate thing that could live in the world, and which is still not, a business or a product, but it was separate from notes for GMing. It was like this could just be a thing that's a PDF, basically a PDF, right, in Google Docs that I could send out. Was that realization separate from the mechanics? And actually a little bit following mechanics. We've been playing space adventure, sci-fi D&D, we called it originally, and during the OSR period, it was just D&D, but it was completely hacked. And it evolved, and we tried, again, different systems. And when it became the grid system, even then, the original version of the grid system we play tested was everyone's 300 million years in the future. There's no humans. Everyone's weird post-humans, and it was fun. It was really fun, but it was closer to Numenera in the randomness, which I say with love. Like I like weird shit and just spamming weird shit, but it does get tiring. It leads to me to shorter loops in terms of campaigns. So for the big, when I restarted as like, okay, I want to play this with my friends again. We're getting, people are moving around. We're getting back together. We're going to play a campaign. I'm going to run this. And I knew the system, but the aha moment was, you're going to be complicit. And so this is not the only way we've done it. I can talk in a moment about Blister Critters, Danse Macabre, what they're doing, and Picaro and how they're a little different. But for Stillfleet, it felt like the aha moment was, I've always been this kind of white collar knowledge worker, right? I was working in the academy and for research at the time, and now I'm back in science communication and marketing. And it's like, I'm part of the problem, but I also don't really know what else to do so that my wife and I have, heated homes and food to eat and stuff like that. So, we can go protest, we can call somebody, but it's like, unless you're taking up direct action and, the 70s style, like fighting from within, it's like hard to know in a way what to do. So I made a game where it's all the fun of a space D&D, you're, shotgunning Cthulhu, whatever, on an empty Hulk. But, also you like know that the company that's setting you out doesn't have your best interests in mind and often is lying to you and exploiting you and exploiting others and asking you to exploit others. And so it can go sort of in a spectrum from we ignore all that and we're just fighting, aliens and whatever. You play it more like most people I think play Mothership, to a much more, sort of to me sophisticated game about the kind of noir spy and political agenda of you have all these powers, but what are you going to do with them? And for example, there's powers in the game like Slay. So Slay is basically a power that the Still Rider can start with. So you can start at level 1 as a Space Marine who can, hit someone, and if they succeed on the attack, they can roll to hit again, and if they do, they just kill the opponent outright if they burn a bunch of grit. And it actually causes you to feel very shaken if basically because it's kind of fucked up. In the basically the way that most encounters work in most games that I've played, you often both sides aren't really that committed to shooting each other, like the way that the players themselves aren't. Their characters also are like, I don't know, I'll just take a pot shot. And I think that also makes players think about it differently, that they could die and that they're actually killing real people who are intelligent. In Stillfleet, most everyone you're interacting with, robots, aliens, they're people. And I wanted to make a game where that felt meaningful, but also in a sense like you can't just kill one guy and fix the system. Even if you went and found one of the directors prime of the company who may not even exist, killing them wouldn't like change the company. The company's very powerful. They would just arrest you, rebrand you, and space you. Um, and so that sort of hinge moment of you have to make a character who's complicit and you have to think about what you would really do. And I'll give you interesting scenarios, and I'm not going to make them too fucked up, and I'm not going to make them didactic, and we're not going to go into real politics. They're just going to be fun, weird situations, but the company's going to give you messed up stuff to do. It forced, like, literally the very first playtest, the players looked at each other and said, we're going to make our own company, the virtuous company, instead of the worshipful company. And they went off to the races, right, with like all the things they were going to do differently. And of course, it's hard and it leads to collateral damage. And every campaign I've ever played now for years has been like that, where people have said, "Oh, you're not going to fool me," or like, well, I only care about this. I'm going to fix this one problem. And you see the sort of different strains emerge. And I think in real time, you see people grappling with, to me, real political concerns, but in a fun way because we've made it different enough from daily life that it's far in the future, it's aliens. So it has kind of a cake and eat it too situation of the escapism of a space D&D, but also these are sort of pressing real ideas. And again, I think the other games we put out are all in that vein, but very different narrative structures is how I think of them. Like they're not all the same. You're not always powerful and quietly quitting. Danse Macabre is obviously zombie apocalypse and your peasants, but it's still a game that has at heart a kind of thesis that like, hey, the nobles don't have your best interest in mind. They're going to send you out to dangerous stuff. So it borrows a little bit of that, but it articulates it very differently. I don't think you would necessarily look at these books or page through them and say, oh, this is about politics, even with
Yeah.
Stillfleet. I mean, I think you have to play it and then you're like, oh, I get why you're saying this, Wythe. You know what I mean? But we've tried hard, I think, to strike a balance and not come off as like strident, preachy people.
Right. Because you have to sell your leftist games also too.
They have to be fun. They have to be
In the
fun,
capitalist hellscape. No,
Yeah.
I think that's so interesting. Like it's also like I think everybody has a different. And most people have different relationships with words. We really shouldn't. We should all generally think words mean the same thing, and we oftentimes don't. Like I'm kind of curious for you. Like for me, a lot of the themes that kind of come up in a lot of the grit games are like they are weirdly like, hey, you've got to have hope about what's right in front of you while you also can't change the world at large, right? Like there's a sense of like um subsidiarity, like hopeful subsidiarity,
Hmm.
and a little bit of a like despairing like solidarity, right? Like are two of the things that like whenever I look at the themes that come up in the games repeatedly for you, like those are kind of the things that I hold in tension. Those That's also me reflecting on the fact that like those are things I hold in tension in my own life, right? Like
Yeah,
how
yeah,
subsidiarity and solidarity like interact with each other, how I feel about any of them at any given time, the fact that I'm generally an optimist, and try to do what I can to take action in the world. Like so there's certainly a level of me reading my own lived state and political ideology into that. Like, but as you kind of dive in, what are some of the like pulse points you would use to say like these are the themes that we continue to pull out to make it kind of like enter into that space, right?
yeah.
Whether like they don't need to be the ones that I observe, right? Like, but those are I want to give you the ones I observe first, so that way you have something to react against. But if it's totally different, that's all right also too. I just love to kind of know like as we talk about what it means to be leftist, which I wouldn't describe myself as, even though I love people who are leftist. I think far too mercantile to cleanly claim that title. But I'd love to hear from you, kind of what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, no, I think you also hit on something that's very true, and I think it's reflective, as you're saying, it's reflective of your reality. It's reflective of my reality. Is like I do what I can. It's obviously it's not enough, right? And these structural issues, to underline that in a game just reinforces the reality, which means you can't change it if, or not that you can't, but you're sort of not giving players tools to change it if you're saying, yeah, buddy, if you kill one guy, it's not going to fix the system, right? So I think there's a tension there, which is, are you giving people tools to simulate better worlds, or how are you highlighting those tools? And are you giving them sort of simulations of the the hellscape we live in, you know what I mean, in
Yeah.
terms of all the repression and straight up oppression. And so, yeah, again, you do want to punch Nazis, right? You do want to kill the bad guy to some degree. You also want to change the system. And that's, I think, you get ideas like the subgenre of SF called solar punk, right? Which I'm very like sympathetic to. I am a little older, where these things are time bound. So I wasn't around when cyberpunk came out, but obviously read as a kid Neuromancer, and that was important, and have played Shadowrun. And then what I got into was biopunk
Hmm.
and these stories of bodies, and also because I studied the life sciences as an anthropologist and studied food and medicine, and thought, oh, that's so interesting. We were genetically engineering food and now people, and this is going to become more common. And so, authors in sci-fi sort of did the what if, and I think that's a theme that you see throughout our work is body horror. And I think some of us, I think everyone who's worked together on our games really aligns with this idea of like imagining bodies as other, and that there is a kind of politics to that, or a kind of you know, there's something psychological that happens when you imagine yourself as other, and that's, I think, very simple, and that's one reason people play these games, to pretend to be not themselves. But you can really push it. So instead of not myself, but I'm in, an exosuit with a shotgun or whatever in space, it's like, you can have mutations in almost all our games where you like keep changing as the game goes on. And with blister critters, yeah, you could definitely die. You're a little guy, you're a mutated animal who's intelligent. And I think that's actually one of the better, it's probably the lightest game, and it's really good at simulating some of these things you're talking about do you and your burrow make a difference just for you and your burrow and maybe
Hmm.
some other friends around? Or do you change the world of blister critters, which is left very undefined? There's no lore in blister critters. It just says, yeah, it's happening now. The implication, because Tony's in Tallahassee, I'm from Atlanta, is that it's sort of suburban Sunbelt vibes, like the things that are drawn. But we have a zine coming out from our friend who lives in New Zealand, who liked it and wrote this whole thing about animals in New Zealand, which is a very interesting, ecological place. And I'd like more of that. I'd like people to take this game and say, well, there's different animals at different places to explore after humanity, all around the world. But I think the politics might be the same, where, if the idea is all the animals are just now becoming intelligent and there's no humans, if you really think through that in the Watership Down mode, which is how I like to play, Tony the creator plays it much more, SpongeBob, it's all one-offs, right? But I think you can play it in a way where you're getting at these deep questions that you're raising of, can we make a better world, or do we just replicate all the problems of the old world? And again, I don't know that that to me is a productive, fun, genuinely fun place to explore in terms of gameplay, separate from any deep project. It's just fun. It just
Yeah.
creates great moments at the table. People do think deeply, but not that deeply. It doesn't feel didactic. It feels natural. We've all watched these, right? Like zombie movies or TV shows where like the real problem was the humans. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what did we do after we get back together and kick the zombies out and have
We're
a
the
wall?
Walking Dead. Spoilers, everybody, for Walking Dead.
No. So yeah,
Uh,
so that's I think what we bring to some of the games just because it's fun.
yeah.
Again, separate from deeper themes of like otherness and sort of queerness and exploring the world through a different body, and also yeah, like say those questions of complicity, and as you raise very serious questions around what can I ever do, and what would make a fulfilling life for me, the character, which of course makes the player sometimes think, damn, how much should I be like this character I'm playing? But again, I don't know that that's that different from just playing D&D or any game you want. Do you know what I mean? Where you have an avatar, it's not you. You have a society, it's not your society. You're going to probably have a lot of those same thoughts. So I don't mean to say that we've completely invented some new way of playing. We've just, you know, articulated it the way we like to, and we've had a lot of fun. It seems to have resonated with folks.
Yeah.
But
No, I mean, like I said, I think it is. So I am I am very weary of people who are like, we are a leftist games company, right? And then you look at their games, and I'm like, but I don't like. It's not critique. You can be a leftist game company and not just be like here. But like every time I pick up a Stillfleet game and look through it, read through it, like I'm like, oh, like I do see themes here to me that are clear about that. Like even just watching things play, like I can see like the way those games are creating, to borrow a Forge term, which I hate to do, like creating a fruitful void in which like that type of narrative easily comes into existence. They can be the thing the game is about without you having to prescriptively say, here is what the game is about. And I think it's really admirable, like, and it's really beautiful to see it in action,
yeah, thanks.
like in an authentic way, right? And in a way that I think people would come to it. It's my favorite thing, right? And this is like the much I think on like TikTok and social media right now, like the like getting the MAGA person to be like, the town guards are doing what, the kingdom's king is doing what, we've got to stop him. And it's like we're just describing things that your dear leader has love for right now, in our real world. And yeah, you're enraged by them when placed in fantasy. Like I mean, I think there is like that is like when those things can come up and play, right? Like when we can allow, this is my favorite thing about speculative sci-fi, right? This is my favorite thing, is like it pitches us so far out of ourselves as to allow us to look back at ourselves and say, who are we as humans and who are we as people, right? I think a lot of games do that. And a lot of games, like, you're also just being a funky little freak. And I think it's great when games can do both, but I also think like y'all have made a choice to create a space where those conversations can come up readily, and consistently, and it would work against the theming of your game to be like, yeah, no, we are just going to do whatever the corporation wants. Like, we're
Yeah.
fine. Or if you are, it's going to slowly destroy you. Like, right? Like if you're going to make that, which is another type of narrative we're telling. So, yeah, I always love like getting to see it, and it was fun to watch it take shape in Picaro also too while y'all were developing that, right? Like, and then even as we were sitting down to explore like what was the actual play going to be, and it being like Tortuga and pirates and like that, the fact that that Quinn thinks the game is a cowboy game, and I'm like, I mean, it's not a cowboy game. It could be cowboys in it, I
You
guess,
got
but
horses, yeah.
you got horses, and so but like all of those things, like you have a level of like those are all things that like commonly come up with like beyond just existential like horror, like a level of dissatisfaction that is, again, I think this is another great NSR touchstone. Why are these people in a dungeon? Like, like
Yeah,
why are these
yeah.
people taking this job? Why are the animals trying to protect their burrow? Why are the peasants doing what the noble like these are questions we have to ask ourselves in order to really engage in play. And because because you have to make rent is a really like compelling reason, but that really has to be driven for no shit. Quinn's in the chat. He caught us bad
Oh
mouthing
no.
him. Um,
What's up, Quinn?
uh,
Um,
but
yeah,
yeah,
well, I mean, like I think that's something maybe at the NSR that, and this is, it's funny because I'm an anthropologist of food, really, and I work mostly day to day in, healthcare related science, marketing, communication stuff, and then I make games. So I'm not really an anthropologist or historian of games. I've just played them a long time, but not nearly as long as some folks, etc. So I want to be careful just to say that, but I do think that millennials and younger folks are more aware of what, like Timothy Morton is an important philosopher of climate disruption, calls the ecological thought, like thinking ecologically, which I think is a precursor to any kind of positive social transformation, whatever political word you'd want to put associate with it. You have to be able to think about the fact that it takes a certain amount of petroleum to make my computer, to move the computer around, and that actually, like, any one well is not, causing that much of an issue. It's sort of like you have to be able to understand these are like huge systems that we're all plugged into all the time. So for me to make a game, I use the computer uses resources, etc. So these are all sort of slow movements over time of, can we do these things, better? Can we treat each other better? I'm very aware, I'm really engaged in like environmentalism, and I think that's another through line of the games is thinking about the character, even if you want a light, fast game. Like Picard is really light and fast, I think, to learn, but it's still in a wider world
yeah.
and stuff's moving around. And so one of the things we did with that was just reduce all the complexity of the buying stuff to, two systems. One, a traditional, you could get money, but you don't start with any money. So you have no silver. You can't buy anything. But you do have infamy. You are a known person, and you could just walk around and ask other people, mostly poor people, hey, you know that I robbed that rich guy last month, or like, hey, I just need a horse. Like, I need to take your horse to do something. I can't really. It's Dracula's here. I gotta go kill Dracula. Like, could you just give me your horse? And you can roll, and they might just be like, ah, sure, take the horse. Like, good luck, And it's meant to be a game where the economy is there, and again, you can get silver, but the way you level up, or the way you improve your infamy die when you level up, is by giving away your silver,
Yeah.
and that would be something that makes the game feel, not that again, money's unimportant. It's obviously important. It's important probably to the guy whose horse you stole, but you'll come back and get him, right? You're like, I got you, bro. I survived. I
And
killed Dracula. Here's 50 silver. Thanks,
and like when we as a company like we went on strike last week as part of the general strikeout, right? Like we don't have a union. We're a very flat leadership model. Everything in plus one is fairly egalitarian. But like the owners were calling the strike, and so to our employees, we were like, "Cool, we'll pay you the." Most people don't work on Friday. It was a Friday. We're like, we're still going to pay you 1/5 of the amount that we would normally you would normally earn during a week because we're telling you stay home, like right. And we like donate. We closed down, but we donated the proceeds from the day. Like
Nice.
we don't do that, and it's so hard. Like I even say this, and I was clear in our channel, so I want to be clear. Like you don't do these things to market. Like I didn't do these things so I could talk about them on stream. But like when you do, like we pay people because like we were like cool, like that represents you being able to eat and pay rent and have a safe place and to be home and to be comfortable and to live and to thrive and to do good things. Like money represents that, unfortunately. Like those things should just be
Yeah.
things people, but like it's our way of saying like we desire this for you as our staff, right? And we want you to have this, and we don't want you to be worried about these things. And so like it is never like, oh, like unfortunately money is important. However, the ability to do a good thing with that, to invest in someone, to come back and pay for the horse after you ran off, like whatever the case may be, like those things are, and it comes up commonly in play because that money isn't real, that people are generous in ways they wouldn't be, or miserly in ways they wouldn't be. And it's always weird to see the way that the economics, even when they are not the main focus, become
Yeah.
representative of the things that actually human beings need and want. And so
Yeah,
um
it's funny they always become microeconomic sims, these games, where sometimes, I mean, not for everyone all the time, but you always get that moment of like haggling over like a saddle. And as a GM, I'm always just like, just take the saddle. Just take the saddle. It
yeah,
doesn't matter.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I don't care. But I think it's fun, genuinely, for the players to sometimes, as you said, behave differently than they would with they're playing with the house's money. It's fake money. So they can haggle and get something really great in a way that in real life they might be frustrated by that. And it's a
yeah.
different kind of catharsis. And again, that's not why I make the games, but I do get that that's having to simulate the economy means you have those weird moments. And I think Picaro, I do think works in part because of that fact that, okay, it's just a die. And it represents not necessarily having it's not a wealth die. It's a celebrity die in a weird way, so it's a different take on kind of trying to model that you at least are outside of the economy. The economy's there. You just kind of have a different relationship to it.
Yeah.
You and your horse are like over there.
Which is probably a great chance for our last bit of time together to talk about, like, we've talked about the grit system, what it's doing. We touched on mechanics briefly. I dropped the SRD. It's pinned in the chat right now. It's in the description. You can go
Thank you.
find it, along with just checking out everything at Stillfleet or Picard over on the +1 side if you want to check out what the grit system is doing. If you're a Zine Club member, you already got it. If you're not a Zine Club member, go to rpgzine.club. So there's again all the different things that you can do. There's all kind of the spaces of play that you're trying to facilitate within that open up these stories. But again, we've talked about a few different games, and I think people may not understand clearly what they are like. So I kind of want to run through, as we're closing out, each of the games, and then how you have approached the grit system a little bit differently in each one of them, to kind of fit the theming that you're going for in that. And I think the easiest way is just to go in chronological order. So let's start with Stillfleet. I know we've talked about it a little bit, but go ahead and give us like the elevator pitch and then like what we're doing in the grit system specifically in that one.
Yeah, for sure. So Stillfleet was the original game, and it very much comes out of my love of different subgenres of sci-fi. So it's a mashup. It's not just far future sci-fi, but it has a lot of biopunk elements. There's a lot of espionage. There's a lot of really weird, sort of you might say Lovecraftian, extra dimensional horrors, as well as you could play it more straight hard SF. But it's set far in the future. You're a void miner working for the one company in space, the worshipful company of Stillfleeters, which has it exists because it has this alien space station, which has these time-space gates connected to habitable worlds and vast alien ships that all seem, lifeless but full of technology and perhaps other, scavengers called hulks. And you basically go on missions, called ventures for the company, and they pay you, and they're pretty upfront that they're not the most scrupulous, they're not the most forthcoming, and so the idea is, yes, you're powerful, you level up. It's a really fun adventure game, but it's meant to have that kind of paranoid sense of, we call it now like Severance meets Warhammer 40K, right? But you're very aware of that, unlike I think in most modern articulations of the sort of Warhammer world. So it's fun, it's pretty high power. You have 5 scores, they're all die types, and you burn grit to boost your die rolls. Very simple. And you have very cool powers. You can play everything from sort of Space Marine types to like a translator who can end combat by being diplomatic, to, sort of space witches, tremulants, hell scientists. And there's many different kinds of aliens, and we're going to be working on that more in the year to come. So we're working on Stillfleet 2. It's been around long enough, and there are enough interesting differences where I think we want to streamline certain features, bring in just some features that work. And I will say, Tony, I'll shout you out and Through the Void. The idea of these unseens, we're now working on, we have a whole set of unventure rules. Big shout out to Vex, Vex Chatblanc in the chat, and Ryan O'Connor, our friend, who's been working with us on that. And Jesse King and some other GMs, where
Unseen's rip. I mean, I stole that tech
they're
from
so
Jason
fun.
Cordova.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I
yeah.
loved writing the ones I wrote, and we have other ones that are not in the book that it's one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
I think Stillfleet is such a good setting for that type of thing, also too.
Yeah, and big shout out, like Vex has worked with me a lot on, and Ryan, on these idea of plants, which the terminology might change, but basically having scenes where players decide what kind of thing we're gonna explore. And there's again the handshake protocol of, the GM is setting this kind of menu of possible options, the players are picking that, and then as player plants resolve things, their character's arc, their growth, that can tick off on a clock. The GM plants, the sort of plot points. So it's something we're just now playtesting probably for a year, but I would like to, relaunch Stillfleet 2 as something that is, every bit as fun as Stillfleet 1, but just has some of these other modes of narrative play that really work for us as GMs, more codified and bridged back into the core kind of grid system. So that is where the game came from. I don't think it's more complex, but it's a longer book because it has tons of options. There's just tons of classes, species, powers, and lots of alien planets and encounters, things to do, basically items. There's lots of weird tech. That's another one where we might work on a sort of cyberpunk subsystem of the main tech system. So that would be sort of like 1/7 of all the tech would be, okay, what happens if you're really into the computer part? Which right now it's just glossed as like, yep, you burned some grit, you did a computer thing. But hey, some people, it turns out, know a lot about
Look,
computers and want
and
to sort
here's
of
the
create that.
deal. I either want to be like, I hacked in and did the thing, but what I really want to do is like, cool, I hacked in. what does the virtual world around me look like and how does that interface with
Yeah,
it? Like that's what like
yeah.
I want to be net running, and I don't want net running to be a couple of roles. It's if it is, that's fine. I just want it to be a role then. I if I'm not, I want to jack in and I want it to be another weird world around me that I'm
Yeah.
interacting with.
Yeah, so that's something that's not in there that we want to add. So yeah, that's Stillfleet. The next game was Blister Critters, which is Tony Grasso's game that I co-developed. It's very much Tony Grasso taking Stillfleet and saying, I made a lighter version with animals and it's a cartoon. And it's really great because it's a cartoon show and you can play that in a lot of different ways. And again, it does kind of run the gamut from Watership Down to and like Rats of Nim to like SpongeBob and Ren and Stimpy, and like Looney Tunes. But it's really, really awesome. And I do think it is a great game because the humans have all gone away for some reason. All the humans have disappeared and all their stuff is here. And to me, even though that wasn't necessarily Tony's intent when he made it, it's to me, it's about climate disruption, and it's about the world we live in and just the accumulation of stuff. You have so much stuff available. You can literally use your own desk. You can use any real life location as all of the things you need to run the game. So there isn't really lore. It's like a modern, what kind of place? Are we all in the mall? Are we all in the hospital? I've run one in the World of Coke, this weird museum to Coca-Cola that was made by Coca-Cola in Atlanta, and we had to go to on field trips as a kid. It plays really well. You have fewer powers,
what
but you're
was your
still,
least favorite type of Coke that you drank at the Coca-Cola Museum?
oh, melon. I hate melon. I love plants and fruit, but I
Melon's
just
gross. It's fine.
the melon taste I can't do. It's I don't even think you get the US. This was, they have it's the
Yeah, they're
world, so they have
usually
these
from
like
other
global
countries.
flavors.
I am a big orange Coke fan. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I like orange.
I'm a big
Yeah.
cherry Coke fan also too. I'm secretly a Pepsi fan. And so
Oh.
yeah. But either way, I just also know that everybody I know who went to the Coke Museum has a favorite and least favorite of all the ones they had to that they got to try.
Yeah, it's been a while since our weird like indoctrination in school where we went there and we're like, this is the future. Um, but yeah, we did that game and I think that game it slaps. It's so fun to run. It's really fun at cons. I love doing it at cons wherever I am looking up the nearest theme park, and then that's where the local rats and squirrels have created a new kind of, talking about politics, like just this, apocalyptic post-apocalyptic kind of new hegemony of like there's a lot of us and we're kind of big for the little critters, and they force everyone to do what they call a death race or fun race. There's often litigation around the name, but you're in a race, and we do a mechanic where you're creating a jalopy together, all the critters, and you can kind of design whatever you want. Everyone gets to add a special feature that gives you some bonus, and then we'll do flashbacks during the race to add more features you forgot, just to sort of do that like Fast and the Furious style. Like it cuts back to the garage. There's two characters having that sort of unseen, that
Yeah.
conversation that lowers the tension momentarily, only to ramp it way back up.
Yeah.
So Blister Critters lets you do that really easily. It's written very cinematically to be easy for players and GMs to use the fact they've all watched way too much TV to have fun. Especially if you like a game like Mouse Ritter, I just give it a try. I think it's definitely worth trying. We just are now finishing up and sending to print Danse Macabre Medieval Horror Role Playing. That's the third big game. That's by Christopher Pickett and the studio. And that one is, again, totally different. Same system, but stripped down even more, I would say. And it is set in the real world, but 30 years after a zombie apocalypse, and this in medieval times. So you're medieval. There has been a zombie apocalypse. It's a little different because when you die, you come back with mutations, and that you don't lose your mind right away. But once you die a certain number of times, there's sort of a chance, that you can come back as essentially a mutant zombie. They're called demoniacs, would be the Latin. And so in the game, the main book is set in Constantinople. We have a book in Paris, and then we have a book with 8 campaign settings all over the world, that are really meant to show that, look, we're trying to treat it symmetrically. We, the team, know more about essentially Western Europe, but we really focus on Constantinople because it's a great place where a lot of cultures were meeting and having cultural exchange right around this time. And so you throw the zombie apocalypse in, they have to kind of work together. They don't want to die. And so it creates a different dynamic and it allows us to tell some really rich stories, which I think it's been a really fun game to work on. Again, not that our goal was to teach other people, but just for ourselves. We learned a lot. And I do think Chris did a great job leading the charge on modeling kind of realistically how you're fighting and how to make that feel epic within our system so that it still feels related, but it's very different in terms of power from, yeah, I slay the guy with a shotgun, as the horde of aliens are approaching. It's like in this game, one thing Chris did that's very simple, but instead of rolling movement to dodge, you have to burn 2 grit, then roll. And if you're out of grit, you can't dodge, meaning basically you're getting chased by zombies. You're too tired.
Yeah.
And that as a GM, I mean, it comes down to that last point of grit every single time, where the players have some other objective, but hey, you keep kind of having to run away from zombies, and it feels not boring. It feels cinematic, and it feels sometimes hopeful in the way that people articulate their relationship with death. But I will say you're right that a lot of our games are about, okay, what if you're, again, like the Coen brothers, huge inspiration for me, Cronenberg. What if you're tragic or doomed and you're playing through this person's life because it's interesting and important, but you're not necessarily trying to keep them alive as much as, get the ball across the finish line.
Yeah.
So I think those three games go together pretty well. Picaro obviously was published by Plus One XP and is set around 1700, and that is trying to once again be really light, really fast. It's a zine. It's a longish zine, but it's a zine. And I think that game does a great job of saying you can be heroic, you can have fantastic, truly high fantasy kind of tropes, but it's set using the real world as a backdrop, and it's trying to boil some of those interactions down, like we talked about with Infamy, to a single die roll. So I think it does a good job of thinking through kinds of dudes, kinds of exiles, outlaws, brigands around that time period, and what would be fun about that character. And so even each has like a little story at the top where it sort of says like, well, I meant to do X, but I ended up doing Y, and that's why I'm a Picaro. And I think that was sort of the first thing I wrote. I tried to approach it that way of like, who are these people? Make them sympathetic so that they're not like axe murderers, but yeah, they're brigands. They don't have any money. They're Picaros. So it's a little bit goofier in some sense. I do think it's a good starter one because it's all one and done in a little book. We have a couple more games coming out, but I see it's 9 o'clock, so I'm gonna shut up and ask Tony if you want me to say anything else.
No, I think that's great. No, I mean, also speaking of like that turn, Signal Station, who's been in the chat, looking up all the names of all the people we need to know who are, specifically Seraph and Murtaugh. They do some of the best job of writing trophy backgrounds, which are trophy backgrounds are always like a thing you were, and then like usually a descriptive term for why you would not naturally be good at that job, right? Like, so I'm a nearsighted sharpshooter, right? Like would be a clear reason why, like, hey, yeah, that is probably a reason you would do bad at that. And Michael is just a master at pulling two words together that will clearly define, like, yeah, the thing you used to do, why you no longer do that, or if you still try to do it, why you are not successful at it. And that really helps drive, like, so this is why you're doing the thing you're doing now. Whatever happens to be in front of you.
Yeah, the
Which
grit
is
that
the
makes
game.
the pearl. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're designing characters. Yeah.
So no, but yeah, just give us I know you've mentioned like y'all are working on Stillfleet 2 coming up. I know you and I have talked about like all kinds of other little things. There's one y'all have that you're working on where it's like children and their dreams and other, like there's a whole lot of ways
Yeah,
y'all are
yeah.
flexing this. I do love, like, I think there's two wolves inside of each of us. And one of them says design in all the different systems all the different times, pursuing only only what will be the most profitable for your next release, or that maybe it supports the type of design you want to do. That's also possible. I think very few people are actually doing the type of specialization we see Stillfleet doing. I don't think y'all are locked in. I think y'all are able to do whatever you want to do, explore other systems. But seeing a group take a core design ethos and really design around that, we don't see as many small press and indie studios really kind of diving into that. I think it's one of the most interesting things about it, and I think it lets us think through more intentionally, like what are the design choices we're doing this that are different. I will shout out
Yeah.
again, like I mentioned, like Michael's trophy backgrounds. The trophy community has been historically really good at this. People taking trophy and then saying, like, what are the other things we want to do with this very light system, that will take it in different directions while keeping some of the core elements. And so I'm super excited to continue to see like what type of stories y'all are going to be telling, like at the table through the different designs you're doing. Hopefully we get to play some more of them here on stream or just in person because we live in the same city, not for the sake of
Hell
the
yeah.
content. But if people want to find you and more about the work, they can go to stillfleet.com. Are there other good places for them to look right now?
Yeah, I mean, everything we do can be found at stillfleet.com. On social media, we're everywhere at Stillfleet. So it's pretty easy to find us. And our Discord, if you go to discord.stillfleet.com, you can come on in, and that's a place that's pretty vibrant. where obviously we run a lot of our games. So if any of this appeals, we are working on a few new games. So the Sometimes Kingdom, which is high fantasy, Ultra Delve, which is kind of near future sci-fi, eventually Thrall, which is a really fun, insane dark fantasy game by Chris. So we have a few that are going to come out at some point. I don't know when, but we're always playtesting. So if any of the system, if the sort of politics of games are things that you'd like to discuss, or just try out a game, we have games all the time. And we do also do a podcast, which we'd love to have you on, Tony. I think one reason we haven't is because you ended up pitching us on doing other people, but which is very kind of you. But yeah, we have a podcast called Why We Roll, where we talk about
I will come on a
specifically
podcast. Don't get me wrong. I'm a
come on
white
a
guy with a
podcast.
beard. I'm ready for it. I own this mic for a reason. But yeah, I'm always just like, here are the other cooler people you should talk to, or people who are just should have their voices amplified. And so, but I'm happy to come on anytime.
But yeah, so that's about it. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Go check out all that stuff. If you're in South Philly, look for on the streets at the best cheesesteak place in South Philly. I'm not going to tell you where it is. You got to find it. Wythe will be standing right there. Yeah, it's Angelo's. All right. So we've got some different things coming up over the next little bit. We're doing Monday month every week during Zine Month. We are doing roundups on Mondays. Quinn and I are sitting down sometime with special guests to talk about some of the coolest things that are dropping in Zine Quest at that point in time. Next week, I've not announced this yet. Next week or the week after, we're gonna have Asher from Kickstarter Games here with us. They offered to do it next week, but they're traveling, and I'm like, just enjoy your trip. But that may be the week we end up doing it. We're gonna have Asher on to talk a little bit more about Zine Quest, what's going on at Kickstarter Games, other things like that as part of Zine Month also too. We've got Kyle Latino, Mapcrow, who's going to talk about book maps. We've got Noah, who was going to come on last night, Noah Downs, talk about freelancers, contracts, things you should be aware of if you're working in the RPG field, about how we keep everybody legally on the same page and maintain relationships. We're going to do a little bit of a look at like things that happened with the most recent stuff with Possum Creek, his Abe's Bed and Breakfast, other things like that, mostly from a what are conversations that should have happened that maybe didn't, from a contract standpoint, to keep everybody on the same page. But then also just dive into some generic tools and answer your questions live. And then at the end of the month, we've got Mike Martins talking about stealing great layout from your favorite places and how you make it work in your games. We may have some other stuff coming on. We'll have a bunch of other fun things happening, including some streams and some other stuff. Keep an eye out for all that stuff. Man, I think we figured out kind of an end for this one, but I haven't yet. We're going to wave at the camera until I take us off air. Bye. Thanks, White.
Bye. Yeah, thanks for having me.